How's it, guys? This is our second edition. Things look a bit different and they work. My camera is on. It's always a good start. Um, I don't have my SH55 mic because I want to move my head a little bit more. So I've got a nice, good old C1000. So you might hear a little bit of noise around me. But all in all, it's good. Glad to be here. We had a nice response to the previous video. Got some good questions, good views. I've really had some good responses and questions today. I've got them all down here. I'm going to try and get to all of them. And I really hope you guys, if you've got anything that you want me to chat about, please send a question, send a remark, send money, whatever you want. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's fun. I enjoy doing this. I take for granted the amount of time that I just spend talking to people on a day-to-day basis at gigs when I travel around the country. It's in my nature to mentor, to teach, to share. You know, no one owns the information that we have. No one owns our industry. No one owns the tech. So if you can share what you've got with everybody, go for it. You know, don't be selfish. If you've learned something, someone out there is going to learn from you. So just keep sharing, and that's pretty much. And I live by that. I travel around, I cost myself a lot of time, I miss lifts because I get stuck talking to guys. I love doing that. Those of you that have been with me at the front of the house when I'm traveling or at any event, you know, you ask me a question and I'll stick around and I'll answer it as much as I can. Having said that, I learn just as much. You've got to keep on top of your game. Even getting all this together and getting the tech ready for this has been a great learning experience for me. For the last 2 days. I don't have a webcam on this computer of mine. It's a Mac Pro with a Dell screen. So I went from using my DSLR to using my cell phone via, last week when you were on, I had my cell phone in via Zoom as a secondary, and then I pinned that, and then we had a little bit of problems for those who were there, remember. Now my cell phone is actually just a webcam. Found a great little app. It's called EP02. It's an app. It's free. It's basically a viewer on your machine and an app on your cell phone. It's a free version and there's a paid version. Obviously, the paid version gives you more options for green screen and stuff like that. But I've just have my cell phone above my screen here on a little stand, and it's Wi-Fi connected. It's on a charger, so it's going to run the whole day. It works with all the apps on my phone, so you know we're never too old to learn. Excuse the beard. I haven't seen a barber in a while, so it's getting a bit ugly, but we'll try. So yeah, let's get to some questions. I mean, so the couple of guys, Brett, Kyle, Yeben, Doriso, James, Masters, Richard, got all your questions that you sent. That most of you that have been on the link on Facebook would have seen the questions that they've typed. So I've just copied and pasted them out onto another little sticky here for me on the side, just so I can read them to keep them in my memory. And I really like the questions we got today because they really speak into real specific situations, real challenges that guys face. The one question I'm going to get to first, which is Toriso's one, which is a nice one, and it's a great one that you know you can talk about this a lot, but not everybody listens. You know, in our industry, our ears are our tools. You know, it's probably the most valuable tool you have. It's a tool that you can sharpen and develop your entire life. You know, we get older. There's some biological stuff that happens. Our brains adapt. Your ears change. If you manage your hearing, you can have a very successful, long career. There's some guys out there that I respect a lot, and those guys where you know we've put ourselves through a lot. You know, I do club gigs, I do studio gigs, I do church gigs, I do festivals, all that, and your ears take a punishment. You know, even in traveling. The question here is from Toriso. It says, how do you manage ear fatigue when you're mixing live shows that run for a long duration? Now, we've all seen, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. We've all seen charts and specification on decibel levels in the ears, and as the decibels go up, the time duration before your hearing starts getting damaged or starts getting affected gets shorter. And if you spend 4 hours in a club where it's pumping at 100 plus dB SPL, you're not walking out of there, no matter what you do, without fatigue on your ears. If you're mixing, obviously what happens then is and you're not aware of it, you start going louder and louder and louder, and you're just trying to make up, you start EQing, you start causing a whole bunch of stuff because your ears are getting tired. So it is a real concern. I have earplugs in every bag that I own, different kinds of earplugs. My MEPs are the nice ones to travel with, musicians earplugs, which I got from Noise Clipper. There's a couple of brands out there from the Hearing Institute and all that you can get. But it's not always because of, the other guy's too loud. If you're running around at a festival, your earplugs in, some people often look at you like, why is your earplugs in? Is it too loud for you? You're getting old. It's like, no, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to focus. I need to be fresh when it's my turn. So I keep in my earplugs, and you sit and you go through hours and hours and hours sometimes, whether you're backstage, on stage, especially when you're on stage prepping, side of stage, running around to front of house doing your stuff. By the time you get a chance to get behind the console and listen to your band and do your stuff, your ears are tired. You've put them through the ringer. So don't be scared to run around with earplugs, and good quality earplugs so that you can still communicate. If you just go for full-on plugs, then you can't. You end up screaming. Your voice is gone by the next morning. You don't know what you were doing. So plugs with a filter in, they just does attenuation of at least 10 to 15 dBs, which is a lot. Which means if you're on a stage where there's 100 dB SPL, 105 dB SPL going around, you're sitting at 90 below, which is still loud, but you're getting close to manageable levels. And your ears will thank you later. I put my earplugs in, I do a gig, I get there, take them out, do my mix, and I'm done. I put them in before I pack up my headphones, get rid, so I walk away, with the earplugs in again. And it is management, so the decision you've got to make. A lot of the time with young students and youngsters, never mind students, earpieces, earbuds for cell phones, the guys are listening to all different kinds of music the whole day. And then a good example of this is people that these days with some of the cars, it doesn't happen. But when you get in your car in the morning, early morning, you've gotten home on the weekend, you switch on the thing, your first thing you do, a lot of people get a fright because your radio is so loud. So it just shows you the level you had it at when you switched off. I'm fortunate my car's got a preset start volume, which I've set quite low. But that used to be a problem. You don't realize where you're at, and it shows you your perception in the context where you were at, and then 6 hours later, if you were lucky to sleep that long, where your ears are now when they've rested a bit. I do, over the last couple of years, because I do a lot of broadcast work, a lot of TV work with voice and stuff, which are on Sundays, I tend to hand off some of my work to Depth. Eddie, one of my guys that I've trained up, does a great job. So he'll do a Catsies on a Saturday night if I've got to do voice on Sunday, because there's no ways my ears will recover to its fullest so that I can operate at 84 dB SPL effectively the next day. So I've got to make decisions in that sense. But when I do mix a Catsies, I've got my earplugs. After the first set, which is about 40 minutes, your ears have taken a hammering. People are enjoying the party with alcohol. Your ears are one of the most sensitive nerves in your body. So when you start having alcohol, the tops go quite quickly. And you often, if you arrive at a club sober at 10 o'clock at night, you walk in, you go, whoa, that's loud. And the people inside are talking, screaming at each other, going for it and all that. They've been having alcohol. They're in that environment. The ears are already clamping down. So be careful of that. Doesn't give you a license just to go as loud as you want, but you got to stay in context. If you want to pull rank and say, listen, we can't go louder than 95 dB SPL on average, your dance floor is going to be empty if you're in a club, because the people are they need to get drawn in. So you have to go in the context, which is another question we've got just now. But then what I often do is I've got my MEPs. I know what they do. I know what it sounds like when my MEPs are in or out, and I'll put them in while I'm mixing, and I'll run them and I'll give my ears sort of rest periods, and every 5-10 minutes or maybe 10 minutes I'll take one out, check where I am. But what I do then in my head is I don't go and start EQing and changing. Before I put my plugs in, I check where I am, I check where my levels are, everything is cool, everything sounds great, I know what's happening with my reverbs, because that's quite a crucial one. When you put MEPs in, your verbs are, your peripheral hearing gets affected. Your focus hearing, your vocals you hear a lot clearer, so you can actually mix incorrectly with plugs in, thinking you're okay. Same thing with in-ears like I'm wearing now. You think you're okay, but you're out of context with everybody else. And then just make some decisions. Put your plugs in and then maintain what I'm doing. I run the level, I do what I'm doing. I know the songs, I know which songs and where. I've got to push a little bit of this, push a little bit of that. If it's a song I don't know too well, if I'm not sure, I do take my plugs out, have a listen, put them back in. I got to survive the night. I'm not saying mix with earplugs. Just if you take the wrong bit out of this communication, then that's your own fault. But take care of your hearing. If you can avoid it, if you're doing work around the house with drills and all that, just if industry people can wear earplugs, we can also while we're working, and avoid loud situations. But it's something you have to be aware of. Otherwise, you can't prepare for it. It's too late when you're 35 and you've been hammering away, and your ears are shot. There's no recovery. That's the one part of the body that doesn't heal or can get fixed. So I hope that answers that question. And I'm going to go all the way up to Brett's question. Brett Ordendahl, one of the original Alibi students. He was taught by my dad still. What is your take on monitors when musos or singers ask for instruments in their mix? Like what they need and is not in their mix. What they need and what is not in the mix. Look, a musician standing in front of a wedge, standing in his context, he wants to hear something on a small stage. If you take a microphone, you say to someone, "Can you hear me?" And they look at their wedge, and they go, "No, you're not in here." So, well, that's not what I asked. I asked, "Can you hear me?" You obviously heard me because you got the question. And it's a mindset. On a small stage with a tight group that works well together, that knows each other, it's an easier learning curve. I find this is probably one of the most needed kind of trainings or awareness raise that needs to happen in churches where they still operate on wedges, and even transitioning from wedges to IEMs in your monitors. You can't just give someone monitors and think they know. It's a new environment. The onus is on us to train, to teach, and take it from there. So when someone's got monitors, if you take the environment on a stage, a bass guitarist stands right next to the drummer and he'll ask for kick and snare and maybe even some hats in his wedge. And he's thinking, well, you're standing right next to him. But you must realize there's so much else going on, and the monitor becomes a focus point because it's something in front of you. So for him, it helps if everything comes from there, especially the hats and the timing and all that, just so he doesn't get confused. But it's not something you can't tell him, like, well, you're right next to the drum, you don't need it. You have to have a relationship to communicate effectively. You must also realize that a guy standing next to the drum kit, and he's been standing next to the drum kit for the last 20 years on his right, chances are there's some hearing damage on the right ear. Not damage in terms of functionality from a day-to-day perspective, but HF has gone slightly. And we all know that once your hearing starts getting damaged, definition is the first thing that goes. So we try and make up with that for volume. Vocalists just take comfort out of trying to feel in everything. You get someone, Brett makes a comment here, people say that just give me something of everything. If it's a 4-piece band, easy. A little bit of blend, everybody's happy. On a big stage, We can learn a lot from the big touring environment, and you can't really do that in a church or in smaller venues. But side fills are great for just a fill, and then your wedges in front of you become a focus point. You can have a really good stage setup with that, where a lead vocalist has got his vocal in front of him with maybe some keys or something to pitch from, and timing, and then the big mix is in the side fills, which means there's a lot of efficiency coming from that wedge. It's not working too hard. It's got clean, crisp sound. There's a technical element that comes into play in this scenario, where with all speakers there's an efficiency level, and speakers get older. Any speaker, if you go look on a bunch of websites, JBL, all of them, where when you buy a new system, they recommend after a certain amount of period in the field in terms of rental or on installation or even environment that you're in, that you replace the drivers to maintain the same quality coming out of the speaker. So if you've owned a VTX system for 5 years and it's been doing gigs maybe 2-3 times a month, they actually recommend that you change all drivers, not because they're blown, but the efficiency and the fatigue within the drivers start showing. And you want consistency. If you go and use all the tools available to you in terms of line rate calculators and all that, and you've got a compromised box within a line, your effect or the outcome is not what you think you're predicting. So having all the boxes, that's why testing gear when it comes back to the office, do load impedance tests, log the tests, all that kind of stuff. That's a different subject. But monitors, for example, when you get to I'll pick on a church again. When you get to a church and they've got a couple of, call it MI market monitoring, 2 monitors, 12 vocals, already a problem. They all want to hear each other. They all need to hear the piano. They all need to hear. They're standing on the opposite side of the stage. They need a bit of drums. They need a bit of this. Those wedges they can go loud. So we do 1 for 1 for 1. You can get a lot of volume. But the minute everybody sings, it's just noise. It's very loud, but no one can hear anything. Even with a single vocalist, you go onto a stage and the guy says, you can stand next to him, your hair's blowing back, and he says he can't hear anything. Now, him saying he can't hear anything doesn't mean it's off. He's looking for definition. So your high-quality monitors, and I'm not going to get into brand names, that can maintain a high level of efficiency across the frequency spectrum within context. And when I say context, in other words, they're placed in a space, you're positioned in the right distance from them, they're on the right amplifiers and all that kind of stuff, they've been set up right. You can get a really high quality sound out of them, and you can do a full mix in them, but level is important. But if it's a off the shelf or even homemade speaker, chances of 40 to 30% efficiency is high, which means you're sending a signal to the amp is amplifying and sending it to the speaker, but the actual quality that's coming out of the speaker is only about 30 to 40% representing what you're sending. Then you start compromising on that, because then you've got feedback and you start filtering and graphics but before you know it, you're just wasting your time. So when it comes to monitoring on a stage, more is definitely less. More meaning spread them out more, have more speakers per people. If there's 12 vocalists, ideally 12 mixes, 12 speakers, but you can't do that. So 3 pairs on 3 different mixes, split the people up, lessen what's in there. But you say, but they're blending, they've got to hear what each other's doing. That's correct. But this is where, as a monitor engineer, you've got to focusing on what you're doing, and the efficiency of your speakers are a little bit more maintained, and you can get a better sound. Having said all this, you still get band members and people that just get into bad habits, and I think that's one of the main downfalls. I often say, and I've said this to a lot of people, is when I do monitoring, which I've done often over the years, 95% of the job is PR, 5% of it or 4% of it is the tech, 1% is mixing. The mixing part becomes almost the easiest part of everything. If you know your tech and you know the artist and you can communicate with the artist and you are on the same page as the artist, how do you get there? Communication, relationship, understanding their perspective, which is not easy. And this is where some young engineers struggle, because your focus is on the tech because it's really cool, and before the artists get there, You get that monitor sounding amazing. Your stage is clean, your mics are clean, the EQs are great. You've done a bunch of dynamics, different subject, and then the artists get there and they're not happy with anything, and then you get frustrated because you start getting offended. Well, then go into catering. If you're going to think people's going to like everything you do, okay, maybe not catering, but security or something. You've got to be open. Get yourself technically ready so that when the artists get there, you can facilitate their process. If you know the artist that's coming, your preparation can be towards that. Depending on who the artist is, you can preset a bunch of stuff, prepare, positioning, all that kind of stuff, even some EQ tones that caters for that artist's need. And then when they get there, they fine-tune. If you don't know who's coming, make sure that you're technically ready. And then when the artists get there, communicate. Don't stand behind the console the whole time, and just watch it from a distance. If you're a monitor engineer, one of the cardinal rules is don't leave the console, because there needs to be a point of reference, there needs to be control, and there needs to be a position that is an anchor. But if you're not in soundcheck mode yet, you're still in setup and the artists are arriving, get up on stage, chat to everybody. If you're not sure, I've got a whole workshop I can do on procedures and monitor checks and line checks and all that kind of stuff, which is another day's topic. But just communicate, get ready, and understand that people are people. We're dealing with artists. You don't know what they've come from. They're doing a new song tonight, or they're doing new album material. They've been listening to it in the car the whole way to the gig. They get here, the perspective in their head of what this song sounds like is what they're trying to get out of the wedge on a new environment. And it's physically not possible. And you saying that's not possible doesn't help. Okay? So facilitate, smile, wave, understand your position in the chain of events. If you've watched the movie Shark Tale, you're at the bottom, below the plankton scum when it comes to where we stand. We here to serve. As much as we use the tech, as much as we know what we're doing, we're serving. We're a service delivery to everybody there, and we have to use all that knowledge we have and the skill that we have towards that outcome. And if it means sometimes, I've often said the worst thing you can do for a musician and a monitor is give him what he's asking for. I have to contextualize that, because if you give him what he's asking for the whole time, it's a snowball effect. If you're listening, and this is something that I've taught many guys, if you're listening, if you're doing monitors, if you ever change anything on a wedge without listening to it, in other words, if you're doing a wedge and you've got your Q wedge next to you, you make sure that it's set up right so that you can hear what you're doing. If you're on ears, you're on ears. If the band's on ears and you're on headphones, we need to fix that. You need to be in the same environment as them so that you can apply effective change. Brett's put another question here. When using EQ on a channel or a PA graphic, is it far better to subtract and to add? I think that's an age-old question. Answer, yes. Obviously, the process doesn't start at the EQ. Starts at the source. Chances are, on average, when you hear a tone or you hear a source through a microphone and it's not conducive to what you want, there's one or two things, most of the time one thing that is standing out, but it's standing out in a way that's annoying you or annoying your brain, where you're not hearing the tops, or you're not hearing that attack, or you're not hearing that definition. So you try and bring that in. But if you can train your ear, get to the point where you can identify, hang on, all that's there, it's just being masked by this one thing, then subtract. Then obviously it's cleaner, you're not boosting level, and it's more effective. The last thing you want to do is make your EQ a panel beating tool. Your EQ needs to be a creative tool. We always talk about microphones and source and everything's got to be perfect. Yes, but it's not. Things change, your mic moves. There's so many things that can contribute to you having to do something. But taking away a problem is much easier than fixing it, or trying to fix it and leaving the problem there. One of the most common examples I can give there is a lapel mic at a podium position. You have a lapel mic, you push it up, you've got feedback problems. So you hear a 1K ring, you drop 1K. You push it up a bit, you hear a 2K ring, you drop 2K. You push it up a bit, you got a 500, you drop 500. You push it up a bit more, 1K, a little bit more, and you're killing the microphone. And if you understand harmonics, what you would notice that high frequencies take a lot less energy to feed back than low frequencies. So you can have a low frequency issue at 125 in the room, where there's just a low hum, or there's a node or something happening in that mic position, and because you can't hear that, you're not dealing with it. So you're dealing with all the harmonics. So if you can identify, I've done this many a times. You walk up, you see a guy's EQ, you can't get level. I drop, and the gain's up already now because you've been EQing so much, the gain's up. Flatten everything down. Look at what is EQ'd, and you go, okay, cool, there's a root there. Drop the 125, put everything up with a flat EQ except for the one filter, and you've got 3 times the level. 3 times the level, not necessarily in volume, but in dynamic of the tone, because you're not killing all that the characteristic. So it's just identifying that. Comes back to some of the hearing exercises we spoke about the other day. Obviously, a lot of this stuff comes with time, but it's, people say, you'll learn over time. You only learn over time if you're actually paying attention. That's a very key point. Just because you get older doesn't mean you get wiser. Old people do stuff, and they make mistakes, and they figure things out. And us old people, and we've done it a lot. And I do stuff differently today than I did last year, than I did the year before, that I did 20 years ago, partly because of technology, but the approach is on the outcome, and that stays the same. And I think that's important for us to remember. If you don't know what you want to do, the tool's not going to do it for you. Then you're just fiddling. So I hope that answers those couple of questions. Carl Woods has got a question. Yeah, my question is on venue mixing. So he's talking about actual venues like theaters and stuff. I find myself in theaters where I'm either on the second floor or on the first floor, and you deal with reference mics, reference mixing, reference speakers, obviously, when it comes to the venue layers. And then you walk the room and all that, you get what it sounds like, and then the place fills up with people and you're stuck in like a corner. I think that's our understanding the question. So that happens a lot in theaters. It takes hidden away in the room at the back. You'll notice if you go to theaters during rehearsals, consoles out in amongst the chairs, the lighting console, the sound console, the guys are setting up in the room. Today with Wi-Fi, all mixes almost can be controlled, but you can't during a theater show especially go walk around amongst the people. But you can have different strategies to cope with that. I often, even with corporate these days, you get stuck in the back corner behind a piece of black cloth because that's just next to the kitchen door and no one's going to see you there. And your band's facing away from you, and the audience and the dance floor's over there, and now you've got to try and mix your band. Biggest problem there for me often is I can deal with the scenario, but the band can't see me. They can't communicate properly. That's a bigger problem. So when that happens, if you chat to Brendan and the guys, often I just saw a question here from Simon, what beard oil do I use? I don't know, my kids bought it for me. It's a nice spicy one. But I make a point during a corporate like that or an event like that I walk to the band, I go talk to them, and then during the event I try and purposely make eye contact, move closer if I can, communicate, because you want to set them at ease as well. But walking the room obviously is a great thing. You can't do that once the people are in. If a room's designed well and the PA is designed well, like Richard Smith did with the Pretoria State Theatre, the new acoustics rig that's in there is absolutely amazing. He's done it phenomenally. Front of house, left, right, sub, done. And you can trust that what you hear in that position is what every audience member is hearing. If the room's full, if the room's empty, however you compensate on your side, that's what the room gets from the front row to the back row, right in the top. And that comes from good system design. And obviously Richard's a phenomenal system tech, so that just makes life so much easier. If you unfortunate enough to walk into a theater room like that, where there isn't PA and you've got to hang your own PA within a day, do sound checks, all that, you don't have the luxury of doing that, then you need to have a system tech that's done it. I suggest that on a gig like that, you have a system tech where someone else can do the walking. You're at the console, you need to focus on what you're doing, and someone can come to you and, WhatsApp or radios or whatever, and just tell you, listen, the voice is getting a bit lost, or something like that. But if you're in a booth or in a position where you're not amongst the people, you need a little bit of feedback. And it's not, getting upset because people are telling you mixing bad. It's what it is. So I hope that answers that question. Obviously, theaters are easier. If you're doing a gig at Nasrec, yeah, let's just leave it there. You can put as many bags of water in that room as you want. It's going to be a problem. They just add more problems. So, or the dome. The dome we figured out. If you've done enough gigs in the dome, you know how to set up your PA. You know the do's and don'ts, whether it's a gospel or a talking or a rock and roll or whatever. If you get the guys in there that's done the room enough, trust them. Don't have your own ideas just because you've got an idea. Don't be scared to ask other guys their opinion and their insight if they've done it. There's a lot of guys that know a lot more than me, and it's always going to be like that. So you learn more by asking more, and it's true the other way around as well. You learn a lot by teaching. If you've got the opportunity to teach up and coming guys or new guys, don't shy away from it, because it tests your knowledge more than you know. And those guys goes and check. Google now, you can't get away with lying to people, so just make sure you know what you're doing. Another question here from Eben Niemand. How have you personally dealt with artist/people management whilst doing a live recording set without compromising the integrity of the end product? Do you implement any sort of strategy, pattern, potential conflict management, communications, obviously for the final product? So yes, we do Sound GP, our niche market is broadcast and live recording, so we deal with a lot of things in that regard. So we've got set templates at work when it comes to crowd mics, when it comes to the technical separation of the sound. In other words, if you go into lyric theatre or you go into different venues where I know I've got to take splits there, you've got to do MADI splits over there, you've got to maintain the integrity of the signal. These days with MADI split and Dante split, it's easy to get signal. The challenge comes is if it's a live DVD recording specifically and the budget allows, I do actually tend to try and have separate preamp controls. It costs a little bit more to put in some XDAs or some split so that you can separate that. And technology, Avid S6L is what I'm working on mostly for our big projects, and they're actually in the next version release going to be able to do 3 consoles, so front of house monitors and broadcast. Then for me that changes the ball game. Then I can get 3 consoles. I don't have to split in because I get my own gain structure on my side. Then the broadcast guy just takes the preamp gain of the head amp. Front of house monitors go to their true gain. Everybody's happy. But you've got to maintain. So signal path and integrity is definitely a strategy that you have to speak about. We often get called in at the last minute for a gig that's being recorded. I'm thinking now, 2-3 years ago, we got called on the day for a gig at Kailami Theatre, Sipiwe Dana, live orchestra. And we were all busy. I told Eddie, jump in the car, asked them what they said. There was a VI1 at front of house. There was a MADI card in they weren't using. So grabbed an RME, grabbed an iMac, hard drives, off you went. Got to the event, plugged in, had to work with the engineer who was a little bit hesitant in terms of sharing the console, obviously because now we have to record, still doing sound checks, so we had to just get the client involved in terms of, listen, he has to play ball here because we have to work together. So he did, got the gain sorted out, but we had no say in the miking because it was already up. we had no say in the choice of layout or anything like that. It was very interesting. I mean, miking 2 full orchestral percussion sets, and if you know anything about them, I can get quite big with 2 SM57s overhead. Yeah, anyway, and then they can imagine how the rest was. And then we did that recording, worked well. She actually phoned me, asked me if I could mix it for her. I thought, let me have a listen first. I had a listen. I spoke to Eddie, who was at the recording, asked him a lot of questions about miking, all this kind of stuff. Had a listen, fiddled around a bit. Thought, okay, I can make this work. Phoned her back, and we mixed it, and that actually won Best African Jazz Salma, so live DVD. So that was quite a nice one. But if you looked at my session for that, I had 12 percussion mics in my session, because in front of the percussionist was flautist mics and brass mics and other mics, and I was picking up a glockenspiel from that mic over there, so I would edit it out, make it a track, and I was doing this and I was doing that and a whole bunch of stuff. Get quite interesting, but I had fun. But yeah, so you don't always get the chance to have a strategy. You have to adapt, but that's where experience comes in. We spoke about this the other night a little bit, where communication is key. You know, if you get a client that comes in, the first question, if we get phoned to do, for example, Salmas or voice or whatever. When we do voice, we work with Adrian and them at Multimedia. And, you know, first thing we do is we chat, because he's got a product to deliver. Simon's on the chat here, Simon's on monitors, he's got a product to deliver, I've got a product to deliver, and we have to work together. So I can't just, you know, try and pull rank or try and be snobbish about something. We have to get a solution that works. And if you've got people that understands the different perspectives, it becomes a lot easier. And then just having shot callers. At some point, you know, in the scenario, someone's going to make a decision about something, whether it's a mic position or a mic choice or a layout position or something like that. And that's where the sort of production managers come in, and you've got to be able to have someone to make those calls. And that's where the conflict management comes in, because, I mean, we had a scenario in season 3 of The Voice where we had 2 duets as contestants for those who watch the shows. That means our TV director, technical director Nadia, had to zoom out on her wide shot just a little bit, because now there's 2 people standing where normally it's just 1 person, and all of a sudden you had an eye and a shoulder and something of Denny, the bassist. And he's a great looking guy, but not when he's cut off like that. So we had to move him, but he was in a position where if he moved his left arm, he hit the cymbal. He was right against the drum kit. We have to move the whole drum kit. Other side of the drum kit, we had the brass. Now it's all been tidied up, it's all clean, it's ready for a TV shoot. And yeah, so Nadia called me, can we make this happen? First thing I did is I told Adrian, I went to the band, I said, guys, not optional, we have to do this. We're doing X, Y, Z. I took a piece of tape, I drew a line there. I said, that from this line that way. And they go, but then we have to do all this. I said, yes, we have to. And we did. Now, if you can imagine that before recording, moving a drum kit, which means when we did that, I also had to communicate with James, MD. I said, please, Marlon needs to come back from lunch early, because he needs to help and check his kit. Told Denny we're moving his stuff, move the brass guys. And, you know, we had a successful. It was based on communication, clear decisions, and just make it happen. But you have the right team and the right guys. So things like that can happen. Just looking at questions here. I think I've answered this one already from James. James is asking, I often mention being in context when mixing live sound. What does being in context mean as an engineer, and how do you know when you're in context? Well, being in context means being in context. So, sorry. Let me put it this way. And I can take a learning experience, and Eddie won't mind me picking on him. You know, if you're mixing and he didn't understand this the first time I challenged him on it, but he eventually got it. He mixed a Catchy's gig on a Saturday, which is banned, it's loud, it's going, and then he asked if he could mix at Raymer at front of house on Sunday morning, and I said yes, you can do that, but beware of X, Y, Z. And it was such a challenge for him to mix at such a low level for such a long period of time on a Sunday morning, only with 4 hours sleep, ear fatigue. So there the context is, I'm no longer at Catsy's. The people that are walking have all been sleeping. Their ears are fresh. Mine are shot. So the context here is make educational decisions to not just go louder. Don't just start EQing. Don't do this. Don't do this. Trust the preset that's there. It's a VI6, or 600 now, and work within it. And it takes you by 10 o'clock you're fine, but you've got to make that decision. Or vice versa. Like I said earlier, if you're doing a club mix and you're not drinking, and your ears aren't tired, and you walk in and go, oh, that's loud, and you pull back, and the band's sounding amazing, but the people aren't getting into it because you're just not there. If you're mixing a symphony orchestra with which is these like a classic rock thing like Starlight, where there's a rhythm section and strings, and Mario can talk a lot about this. They changed the flavor this year a little bit, but that's such a difficult blend to achieve, and an engineer that doesn't understand that will get a great sounding drum kit, great sounding rhythm section, and then put them on a VCA and bring them in next to the orchestra. It doesn't work because of the tonality that you've got to keep, of the feel that you've got to keep. What is the purpose of the drum kit in that scenario, all that. So there's a lot of genre stuff that you have to hear there. So I guess to answer your question there, being in context means understanding what you're being asked to do, what you're being asked to deliver, and being able to achieve that based on that knowledge. Richard asked a very interesting question, Richard Newton. That's one of the last questions we got in, which was, why is it that less experienced engineers end up doing stage mixes for artists? I understand the front of house is important, but mixing monitors takes more experience and there's a lot more room for error. Yes. So I think if you've been in the industry for long enough and you're working at the level of gigs that everybody wants to work at, if you take someone like Simon Panos, who's on the chat here, someone like Revel, dedicated monitor guys, they love what they're doing, they're phenomenal at what they do, their PR skills is great, go Simon, but their technical knowledge needs to be of a very high end. So you're right, monitors is somewhere you can make or break the show by messing up the artists, and so many bands that travel, and I've seen international bands now that travel, and they'd rather travel with a monitor guy than a front of house guy if there has to be made a choice, because they can get settled. Front of house, someone that knows their music can get a blend going, and it's great. And monitoring is important. So your statement on smaller gigs and smaller companies, if you take a guy like me, if I go back XY how many years ago, I'm mixing, I'm doing my thing, I need help, I need someone to do monitors, and I'll get one of my proteges to do monitors. Does he have all my skill? Does he have all my knowledge? No, he doesn't. I've got to deliver for the client out front. The client wants me out front. But you keep training. And you learn a lot by doing monitors. I still occasionally do monitors today, for a couple of international bands and stuff, and I don't mind it. It's not my first choice. I love doing front of house, I love doing broadcasts, I love doing monitors, I love doing all of it, but it's a different skill set. Front of house is probably the most critiqued one because everybody's listening to it, but monitors is the one where I tell a story. I'm not going to mention names. I was at a festival, band rocked up, door of the band opened, the bus they were in, got out, one of the band members walked up onto stage, looked around a bit, came off stage and went, it's that guy. And the entire band's shoulders just dropped, and they were like, oh, they're not looking forward to this gig, because they looked at who's doing monitors, because they had a bad experience with that person at another place. And it's like, so the guy that came with him that was going to do front of house ended up doing stage for them, just so that they can relax. It's a mind thing as well. I mean, we can go on for this for hours. The psyche of people. Everything you do needs to be towards putting people comfortable so they can perform. So the rule of always putting the less experienced guys on monitors, it's not a rule. It's unfortunately something that happens in companies. I don't agree with it. I think the importance of and if you speak to my staff, I give the guys that I put on monitors a lot of grief, and I spend a lot of time training them on people skills, making sure you're ready. The prep is a big thing, understanding your responsibility, team delegation, being able to manage this team on stage. If I was on stage for Marius or someone like that, Marius is in front of house, I'm on stage, I've got 5-6 techs, I'm doing monitors, but I've got to run that ship. You've got to be able to communicate correctly. You've got to be able to manage the team. You've got to be able to fault find. You've got to be able to do a lot of stuff. So I feel that from a training perspective, you actually learn a lot on stage, and you can get a lot of skill behind and under your belt. And it's not a progression, because when I've done monitors, I'm going to do front of house. I think that's a big misconception. If you start out by being a box pusher, then you help with the back line, and you become a stage tech, and then you become a supervisor, and then you become a monitor assistant and a monitor engineer, and then you go to front of house and you monitor, and then you've made it. No. You're going to end up where your skill is. If you want to be a front of house engineer, the biggest tool you can put into your belt is knowledge of every aspect of the thing. I've said it a couple of times. Some of the most effective production managers in this country are ex-front of house guys, sound guys, because they see the big picture, they understand the big picture, so it works well. So it can be a very political question. Simon can do front of house, Simon can do anything he wants, it's Simon. But he flourishes in that environment, and he's very good at it. New technology, just for coffee. Thank you. Another question I have here. How do you show artists and clients the importance of good quality? Well, I think clients by nature want good quality, but they don't understand that the text of the responsibility is on you to deliver. If you go in and quote on a gig and then decide to do it in a certain way because of the money they're giving you, that's your responsibility. If we work on a project and we know what the project outcome is, and the client starts negotiating on costings, I'll do everything within my power not to compromise on the outcome. I'll slash costings, but I'm not taking gear off the prep list. And you can speak to Johan and my guys like that, and they, charge nothing for that. But if we take it out, we compromise on the project. But what I do is I make sure that I communicate to the client, I'm doing this, but we're doing it properly. Next time you plan this gig, allow for a bigger budget to do this kind of stuff. So it's good communication. And then the second part of his question is, how do you keep relevant to ever-changing technology and artists' demands? Okay, that's two questions. The artist demands, I think we dealt with already with Brett's question, but the technology thing is something that you shouldn't be got another question coming. I'll get to that one. The technology part, I think for some of us, I'm going to say it again, older guys, we haven't had a choice but to learn technology. When I started out, about 2-3 years ago, there wasn't digital desks and stuff like that. It was a lot of schlep, a lot of hard work. Didn't have all the toys. You were limited in your outboard, limited in your mic choice, and you had to make it happen. And then what happened was, I've got gas. So for those who don't know, gas is gear acquisition syndrome. It's dangerous. You need to see a doctor. But I'm not scared, and I think it's because of where I come from. And a lot of the older guys are not scared to take on new technology head on, but you have to have the learning curve. So we spoke about Dante last time. I was one of the first guys to grab Dante in this country by the horns, and then not just like, let me try Dante playback. I mean, I went full in 9 cards, 128 channels across 3 M7 synced, and went for it. And it's paid off. We have no issue with technology. I push my guys to make sure they understand how all technology works. Do the courses, train, learn as much as you can. The first, I was reminded about this the other day when Gabriel did a Soundcraft webinar or seminar, and he spoke about the first Soundcraft console, the VI1 or the VI6, and I went like, no, the first one is 1998. It was the Soundcraft 328 digital console. Now, most people have never even heard of that, or so you can go Google it. I had one of those from Waldemar. We used it at the RAN show on the main stage with the World Classic Rockers. And it ran my additional channels, and I ran all the support acts through it. And it was a little digital mixer. It wasn't very stable. It was very slow. In today's terms, back then it was like, whoa, look, button, press, move. It was cool. And then, I got an LS9 when they first came out, LS9 16, called it my Leatherman. I used it for everything. And I was controlling it, a little Samsung tablet, which I still have today, through VNC. So my networking technology skills, Wi-Fi skills, IP skills, MIDI skills, all of that, and getting it working on, because Yamaha uses Studio Manager, you need network to MIDI converters internally and all that. And I'd remember when they launched the Golf 4, Lero was the artist, and I set up behind the drum, and I took my little Samsung tablet, and I went in posh venue, and I walked around, and I was doing the mix for Lero and the band. And I'm standing there, and this guy comes up to me, and I was trying to be conspicuous, and he comes up and he stands next to me, and he looks at me the whole song. At the end of the song, I fade down the verb, and she talks a bit, and he looks at me and goes, if you're telling me you're doing the sound, I'd be very impressed. I said, well, I'm doing the sound. And he ran away. I'm like, oh, I scared him off. And he came back with all his buddies. That's very funny. And he showed him everything. So, that's way before iPads and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, now imagine doing that on technology that no one else is doing it. So your knowledge of that technology has to be there. And not just know how it works. You know how to problem file. You need to know how to problem solve and test and secure and all that kind of stuff. So those noise clippers are the business. Love them. Which noise clippers? What I'm wearing Westtones out of Belgium. It's not noise clippers. Thanks, Michael. Oh, I can scroll down. There's more comments. Oh dear. Sorry, I wasn't scrolling, guys. So if there's questions, I'll miss that. I'll check now. What were we talking about? Oh, technology. And going over the years, like now with Avid S6L, even I bought the first VI 5000 in the country. I bought the second VI 3000, and the reason we went for those consoles, and it's educated choices on how our projects work and what we offer our clients. So with MADI and channel counts, integration, support, all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, I was on the phone to the UK the first time we ran our VI 5000 at Scospel at F&B Stadium quite a few years ago. Was the last one, just before the Japanese loss of the rugby, if you remember that. And we connected 2 stage racks, and I just couldn't get this patching working. And I was on the phone. Eventually, I'm on the phone with Andy in the UK, and he goes, "Oh yeah, we haven't done that yet." And now I'm at F&B Stadium. I've got 2 stage racks, and he's telling me it doesn't work. And I've got earfit inside the Obi van, waiting to mix channels. So I was on the phone for 2-3 hours. Eventually, he sent me a beta version where they made a modification, and he talked me through a procedure. I had to kick earfit out the van, and I had to change the software on the console in a very specific manner. And then he very clearly said, don't load this on anything else, it'll break it. And we got our VI5000 working, got our 128 channels working. But it's, I mean, imagine that for a guy that is scared of technology or panics. Now, I'm by nature a very calm guy, so, you know, in that scenario, sitting there, changing cards, doing stuff on the phone to the UK, following instructions, you know, and just loading new software. You know, but I've had much worse scenarios like that's happened over the years. So technology is something you need to embrace. Don't jump on every bandwagon. So what I mean by that is not everything that comes out is relevant to your scenario. You know, if you're working on something, and you know, if you're looking for information about something, be specific. Follow a path. If you're running a company like I do, I had to make decisions on what technology we pursue and what we don't. There's some great products out there, but they don't work in our context. And then sometimes something new comes out and it's like, hang on, we've got to take the leap on this thing. You know, like with the DOT products, which Waldemar represents now. We put the first one in at Rayma in 2013 to do MADI routing management. And even there we had some things coming up because the way we designed it, we ended up having to change the design slightly because the product couldn't quite do what we thought it could do, not because of the product, because of Soundcraft. Soundcraft uses MADI topologies version 1, and they use 2, so splitting the serial communication from the audio parts is not possible. So we had to adapt there a little bit, but that's the thing. And I often say this, you know, if you're reacting to situations, you haven't thought about it. If you're getting to a gig and something happens and you react, you know, it's like a guy that's not prepared. He just grabs the master fade and pulls it down when there's feedback. Idiot. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, you know, if something happens and you respond, it's thought out. You've got control. We spoke about this the other night as well. And you can respond to situations. And the same thing with technology. When technology breaks, which it's going to do, when things stop working, which it's going to do, your ability to respond to that scenario is based on your bank of knowledge and willingness to take that chance. I mean, Marius won't mind me saying this. He did something quite a few years ago, which was the first or the last time he'd ever done that. He did a software upgrade on his Tudor Vista console after final dress rehearsals. Yeah, that was not a great thing to do, and we had to revert back, and everything was fine. Or he did it with the Waldemar guys. But you know, on all my machines in our office, software updates are not automatic. I've got machines running old versions of OS, old versions of Logic or whatever, because it works. It's stable. It's all it needs to do. You know, software on our consoles, we only upgrade when the manufacturers say it's safe. You know, my Mac Pros run an old version of OS because of the AVB drivers not being fully compatible with the Avid stuff yet. When it comes around, it comes around. So just be on the lookout for stuff and just stay on the new technology as much as you can and learn. Check out what's new out there. See what it's for. Check the context of it out, and if it's for you, if it will work. You know, every now and again you find a little gem that's like amazing. So yeah, that's my thought on that one. Did I miss any questions? There's a question here from MJ from RF Junkies. Do you want your mics on mic or line? Okay, so what he's asking me is abbreviated there, obviously. So, for example, on the Accents or the ULXDs or a lot of the RF mics, the Sennheisers, all that, you've got an output choice on the back, which is mic or line, and different line levels. Yeah, I would prefer a mic being on mic if I have the right signal path. So if I'm going through noisy splits or something like that, or noisy analog mults in the old days, then you'd go to line level because you can run your gain slightly lower on the console, your noise level is down. But if you're in a fully digital environment, like we were the other day when I asked MJ, just stick them all on mic. I'm going straight into S6L Avid preamps. They sound amazing. They've already got low level. I've got enough gain. The mics are set up right. Your gain structures in the mics are set up right. Your sensitivities are set up right. I would say mic level. I mean, mic or line. Line level if it's an instrument, mic if it's a mic. But it's again, it's not a rule. You have to take the consideration of where are you at, what context are you in. There are sometimes where we have, they have scenarios where we make a decision. I use me and Simon and Adrian as an example, where we make a decision on a mic or a situation. Let's switch this one to line so we can drop our noise floor. So it's always a discussion, but interesting one there. Okay, here's a question from Quaid. Most user-friendly digital desk for front of house of worship. So a church console. Now, I do have an opinion here. When it comes to churches, what you got to look at, you approach it from the operator's perspective. A lot of volunteers, a lot of turnover of volunteers. In other words, guys come in, guys go out. They don't spend a lot of time. You sometimes get the fiddlers, but you get guys that are fader pushers. They enjoy being there. They're not tech savvy. Some of them move on to be great tech guys. If you look at Stuffs, Stuff started in church. He was on an interview yesterday. So I would say you've got to use the operator. So there are some consoles, and I don't want to use names, and I'm not going to say names. If you know what I'm talking about. There are some consoles which are phenomenal. They sound amazing. They've got great options for integration, great options for running shows, but they are not walk up and play. There are other consoles that are walk up and play. So the best console to put in a church is one that you can take 5 minutes and have a guy at least just push faders, get some information back, and he's comfortable. And with a bit of training, he can do a little bit of soft patching, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it's not always your cheap ones. There's some high-end consoles that can do the same thing. It's very difficult to answer this question without mentioning names, so I'm not going to do that. Anyway, put me on the spot there. Michael, I answered your question about the Indias. Yes. Okay. Anton says he's remember that. I think he's talking about the VI 5000 scenario, which I was on the phone about. Yeah, and I think that, so I've answered all the questions. I think Johan's been posting some links here to like Gabriel's Soundcraft training that I spoke about. That's been going on very well. We had some good responses there. Rukundo's busy doing a range of interviews every day at 5 o'clock if you guys want to check that out. The producers have been doing their thing, Lebo, Kolani, and Joseph, every evening. Monday, I think 3 times, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, which has been great. Last night they had like a 3-hour long discussion with what's his name? I'm Joyous. Struck a blank. So I'm just looking at the questions here. Brett Odendahl. It's all about negotiating. Yes, it is, Brett. But you have to negotiate with the relationship. Paul's asking, how do you deal with live recordings in a hall that has bad acoustics like echo? Well, live recordings is obviously, unfortunately, what happens is people choose venues that will get the crowd in, and fits the budget. Not always. I mean, if you do a live recording in the Dome, it's got acoustical problems. So there, your mic choice is of utmost skill. That's where I definitely would have splits in, get separate gain control for the recording side. We did the Parlotones DVD years ago in the Dome, where We did it on Elisa's HT24 machine still. But we bought in an M7 just to have gain control separately. Crowd mics is important. You've got to spread them out properly. You need to understand how the producer of the album is going to use it as well. If they want to mix 5.1, if they want to mix stereo, if they want to mix for broadcast, all that affects how we do our crowd miking. And then your biggest choice comes in on your live mics, for example, your main vocal mics, your BV mics, stuff like that, which obviously are going to pick up more noise. And there you can't skimp. Just if all you've got is a 58 on a ULXD or something like that for your lead vocal, I would spend a bit of money, get a different capsule that is a bit more focused, gives a bit more quality sound. Your gain structure in that chain where MJ comes in there, the sensitivity on the mic then becomes very important, so you don't overgain and get too much noise into the channel. You're gonna have spill, and you even get to the point where you start adding a bit of coaching, and again it comes back to that PR relationship. If I go up to an artist and I say, and this is where the monitor engineer shows his skill. If I'm struggling in front of house, or if I'm listening to a recording and I can hear the guy's too off the mic, in other words, he's not on the mic, and he's happy, he's got in-ears, it's sounding great, I have to go and talk to, and we did this at The Voice, for example. We speak to Simon, we speak to the vocal coaches. We have to drop their volume so that they can get into the mic a bit more, but we have to communicate that in a way so we don't make them self-conscious about it, and they understand why we have to do it. At the end of the day, the quality is in the recording. So the closer you can get the source to the mic, the cleaner the mic is. If you're in a venue with really, 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 really bad acoustics, it is what it is. I mean, these days, there's a lot of guys that I've seen some producers where they record the main vocals and stuff just for a guide. They're going to go and overdub it, and it's horrible. But if we do it right, you can give them a product that really works. Statements. How big is the difference between front of house mixing for a small gig with a small PA of max 200 people compared to doing a huge PA minimum of 800 people? Well, that's not really huge. How do you transition? So that's an interesting question, because we've had, and I've seen guys do this. I've had to learn. Going bigger is not just going louder. So doing front of house in a stadium, you can't do what you did in a club or in a small venue. You have to approach things differently. Your dynamic of your whole situation is different. Your overall SPL is going to be different. Your PA design is different. All these kind of things. So your mix workflows and all that, it's going to change. Your gain structures, everything will change because of the environment that you're in. The difference here is not necessary, and you'll change that by default because you sort of know what you want to do. What happens here is guys that do sound checks incorrectly in terms of, and I'm going to use the word again, context. So gospel guys will get this and struggle with this the most, and I've seen it, where they've got a situation where they've got a band on stage, artists going, empty room, say 200-300 or 2,000-3,000 seater. They do a sound check. The band comes out, they listen to it. It sounds amazing. It sounds great. It's all at 90 odd dB SPL, then 95 dB SPL. It sounds amazing. Bring the people in. What do people at a gospel gig do? They sing. They sing loud, which means you got to go from 95 to 105. And if you just push up your faders, it's disaster, because your headroom, structures, balances, dynamic relationships, all that stuff is completely out. So when you do your sound checks, we do line checks, we do sound checks, you've got to be able to go into that context. And I've been called, I had a guy come up to me once doing a sound check, and I just did it for one song. He comes up and he says, "Why are you so loud?" And the room's empty. Like, I'm checking my system, I'm checking what I can do, I'm checking if everything's going to work later. And I ended up going a little bit even louder than that during the gig just to get above all the people singing. You know, in the old days, on old analog systems, some of the guys will remember when you tuned your system, you had to tune it at concert level, because your analog, you didn't have DSP. Digital signal processing is extremely adaptive to your outcome, and that's another lecture. But in the old days, you would tune a system at full volume, get it ready, and then you go and play background music when the people walk in, and there's no low end, the mids is weak, it's very toppy and all that. And then it's just, the PA is not designed to play softly. The PA is designed to go loud. These days with DSP, you tune a system almost at any level you want, obviously depending on acoustics. And when you go louder, it's adapting and it's giving you the outcome that you want. So it's a lot more forgiving. But you as an engineer needs to make sure that you're ready for what's going to, and this is where the reaction response comes in again. So, you know, when I do workflows on my consoles, if I'm mixing in a corporate for 50 people or 8,000 people in a stadium or 40,000 people in a stadium, it's very simple. Similar, the way that my workflow on the console goes, because my muscle memory and how I want things laid out or where I find things is set in a certain way, so that I've got the ability to respond. And I make sure that I've got someone there, like I answered the previous question. I've got a guy on the system looking after the system. I've got a guy doing this, got a guy, and you focus and you put people at their strengths. And make sure your team around you is sorted. Michael's making a comment. Remember you putting your cap over the VU meters while mixing Kevin Singleton because the audience got so loud. Yeah, we were going into the red, but the people were just too loud. Good and bad experiences with drum shields from Mr. Z. So what is a drum shield? You know, there was a picture going around that the only people surviving coronaviruses are church drummers because they're in cages. It's very funny. A drum shield is there just to shield the drums. And building a full cage gives you the experience of isolating the drum kit, but what happens is the drums themselves sound the worst. The clear sonics panels and all that, people go and make them visually pleasing, so they make a nice round bowl. It looks nice and straight and clean, but you're making a reflective parabolic back to the center point, and you get spill on everything. I tend to stagger them so I can get a lot of reflections and refractions. I even put a bit of acoustic paneling on the inside of the shield, under the snare, front of the kick, all of that kind of stuff to try and avoid some of the slapback if I have to put a screen on. The recording we did with Boosie the other day, we did left and right of the drums. We left the front of the drums open just so we could cover the guitars and the PVs. If I had a choice, I would never use it, purely because of the quality that you get. But you are in small scenarios, small systems, it works. And if you know how to do it, this is where your miking on the drum kit becomes important. The more accurate your miking is, and if you understand what the drum shield is doing and what's happening, so you need to go sit in there and have a listen. It gets loud in there. So working with reflections and all that and messing up with the shield, I'd rather do absorption. What we did at The Voice is in the set above the drummer, we went and installed a bunch of acoustic material just to absorb the cymbals and stuff, but we had no shields in front of it. And we had the brass right in front of him. So, good and bad, yes. Outdoors, open festivals, almost never a problem because everything is so spaced out. So it's more of an indoors problem. In a church, the reason they have drum kits is not because of all the spill onto the mics. Is the first service at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, people are quiet, drums are loud, you know. And if you block him off, you've got a bit of control. So anyway, you can get a volume control him, unless you go full electronic like Redemption Church has gone. Right from the start, they went full electronic kit. Drummer can play his heart out, they mix it in, but your stage volume is missing. There's no noise. So I hope that answers that. Very good question, and completely yes. From DZ Sunny. Ever experienced different sound preferences when mixing with different countries and cultures? How do you adapt your mixing? So on that one, I mean, I've been all over Africa, been in the States, Guatemala, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, and then you have to adapt. I mean, I remember I went with Emoja to Japan, and Emoja, if you've seen the show, it's very African, very, the music's a very certain style, Picasso and all that. But Japanese people seem to be reserved. And I went to the producer. We had our sound checks and all that done. I went to the producer and I asked them straight up, can I put the show out the way that, because it's an African show, can I put it up the way it's supposed to be? He says, do your thing, don't change anything. And I did, and the people loved it because it was a culture shock to them, because we brought an African culture into a Japanese theater. But then if you work with, between Australia, South Africa, America, Europe, there's different tonal qualities. People get used to different sounds. That's probably the most common negative comments that you hear sometimes. Like guys that'll go watch a show from an American band that's out here with their engineer, and the guy goes, and the people comment. What he's done is he's brought the American sound, which is not wrong, it's just different. And same thing with the Australian sound. It's not wrong. It's Australian sound is very smiley face, in my opinion. Low end, very sharp, brittle. They're very controlled in the mid range. Americans tend to be a bit more edgy. Europeans very smooth, calm. And you can see that in the flavor of the PA systems that get designed in those countries. Up until not too long ago, an American PA would never get used in a Europe tour, and a Europe PA would never go to use an American tour, because it's not the engineer, it's the style of the PA and the way that it was designed. So there is differences, but again, listen to music. I mean, you go to Nigeria, you're going to go do a gig in Nigeria. You're going to go to Europe or wherever. Listen to what the people are listening to. If you're traveling with a band, then you have to represent that band. You can't change, because that's their sound. If you're traveling with, like I said with Emojo, if you're traveling with Mango Groove, like Ifit or Johan or one of those guys, they book Mango Groove because it's Mango Groove. If you're going to Europe, you're going to Brazil, or wherever you're going, that's what they want. So don't really adapt. Only time I'm going to say you need to adapt is when you get booked as an engineer for a festival in a foreign country with the foreign artists, and you're the foreigner now. Then you have to adapt. But then it's just the fact of listening and ask questions. So as much as I can say, but that was a good question. Looking through the questions, I just saw the time now. We've been going on a little bit long. I think we're close to calling it for the night. If there's any final questions. Looking at Johan's thing, yeah. With social distancing becoming the new social norm, what can be a sound guys do to bring good entertainment into the masses digitally? I'm going to let someone else answer that. There's so many guys with opinions out there. I mean, the artists are doing it themselves at the moment. They don't need us. I mean, churches are doing it themselves. Artists are doing it themselves. If you watch, I saw a clip today that the Cape Town guys put together. So, I think if you've got the ability to bring technology and technical assistance, like we're helping out some churches at the moment with their live recordings and their live streaming stuff. So bring your assistance, bring your quality, bring your tech. But at the end of the day, unless you become a producer of content, you're still in the service side of things. So you just need to support and give them what they want. So that's a tough one. I mean, the whole country is talking about that. Our industry needs live events, because as much as we're going to go on digital platforms and the entertainment will happen, the freelancers are sitting at home, because we're not working and our gear's not going out. So yeah, that's another subject for another day. Dominic. Dominic's got a question. I think we'll make this our last question for the night. Dominic says, I have a question from my side. This is something I've somewhat been thrown into a scenario where you don't quite have the ability to be able to listen to the main hang of in the theatre. I answered that one earlier, Dom, but it's a similar question to what Carl asked in theatres where you placed under a balcony or in a back room or something like that. If the system's been installed correctly, obviously your near field monitoring needs to be voiced very close to that. If you are near fields, if you are fortunate enough to hear some part of the PA, that helps. But your knowledge of the room becomes important. I suggest having someone walk around, if you've got the ability to walk around yourself, first or second time, and then mix on your gut. I often get placed in a scenario, especially with corporates, where you're like physically in the worst position in the room. You've walked around, you've done your thing, come back in, put my headphones on, and I literally tell myself, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Focus on this, because those things are fine. And you just do that, and it becomes a mental exercise just to stay disciplined enough to do that. Whereas if you have the opportunity to have remote control, that helps. But obviously that only takes it so far. What is the most challenging? I said that was the last question, but Claudia put in one now. What is the most challenging issue when doing broadcast mix for live production, awards, course, audio? Okay, there's two parts to this question. The most challenging thing is the artists. We did the Mzansi Youth Mzansi Viewers Choice Awards the night before we got shut down to the 100. It didn't go too bad, but we don't have all the artists for all the run-throughs. Our sound checks were very staggered. But award shows are notoriously just a challenge. From a broadcast perspective, your biggest challenge is just your ability to bring it onto the right platform. So if you're walking on our different broadcasters, they've got different presets. So you need to know how your R128 regulations work and how they are applying them. The way Mnet applies on their different channels are different. Mzansi channel, main Mnet channel, sports channels are all different settings within their infrastructure and the MCRs and the automatic loudness controls and all that stuff. What SABC does on their side and all that. So you need to know your tech a lot, and you need to be able to do a proper loudness mix from site, which is a different challenge in itself. I can do a thing on broadcast mixes at a later stage. It's a very good challenge. If you can get it right, it gets interesting. You must remember when you listen to it, and everybody that critiques you listen to it on stereo speakers in a studio or at home. That's 2% of our audience in South Africa. Everybody else is on their TV speakers or on their phone. So you've got to be cross-platform compatible. You've got to be mono compatible. Your loudness ranges and all that stuff's got to be in place. You have to be very aware of what your delivery is. So the challenge there is, I would say, delivery, and then if you're working with a good quality production team, you get good rehearsals in and good time to rehearse, you're set. I've done live broadcasts for SAMAs and SAFTAs and stuff where, not due to anything other than just snowball circumstances over a couple of days, we went into a live broadcast with not one full run through. And then I'm running stems, I'm running grams, I'm running everything. I'm sitting on a Lawu console in a van, which is not my studio. That's when your experience comes in, and your calmness, and your good director in your head, and you just go for it and you run the show. And you pay attention to the technical detail, and you make sure you deliver to the best of your ability in that context. People at home don't know what's happened; they're watching a program. So take it as it comes. Um, Johan says a couple of very long topic questions. Thank points. Okay, I think I'm going to call it that for this week. If you guys want more, tell me, send me some comments, give us some comments and posts here. I'm happy to do once a week. I'll do another one. If there's a really strong topic that people feel that we can focus in on a bit more technical, I wouldn't mind even having a open discussion and bringing in a couple other people, having more than just my face on the screen, and then we'll take it from there. But other than that, I'm going to say good night, and then it was great sitting with you guys. If there's some questions I didn't answer, I'm going to write them down, and we'll try and get to them. Thanks, guys.